I'm Listener and I'll be presenting CashWorks today. CashWorks is a comprehensive cash management solution for Sage 300. It comes with post-dated checks management functionality, advanced bank reconciliation features, and various analytical and transactional reports. Today we will split the webinar into two parts. First, I will do a demo for CashWorks, where you will see the basic functionality of CashWorks in managing post-dated checks on an example of customer transactions. Then after this, we will go one step further and we will talk about how to set up CashWorks and what are the options available in CashWorks setup. Let's start our demo of CashWorks by walking you through the life cycle of the post-dated check. What I will do, I will first print analytical report of customer age trial balance from CashWorks. So I'm just going to select the report. I will print the report for one customer only, customer 1000, to see what are the transactions pending for this customer. Okay, on the report, you can see that there is only one transaction when this invoice is with the amount of $5,000. Now, I am planning to pay Global Trading Company against invoice 18 $4,000, but with a post-dated check. Let's do this. For that purpose, I will go to CashWorks Customer-Related Transactions. Create a new batch, select my customer, which is 1000, add any additional information as required. So I will be paying 4000 and this will be post-dated check. How will the application know if it's post-dated or current dated? Based on the check date. Let's say my check will be in May 31st. So I'm changing the check date. And then now I can allocate this amount to the transactions or this customer. So on the allocation tab, I have only one invoice. I will just select to apply. The application will automatically apply the $4,000 to this invoice. I can save the transaction. If I want, I can print a voucher to be sent to the customer. So this is the voucher which can be printed from CashWorks for your customer. And now I'm happy with the transaction. I can just simply post it. Let's close the screen, make this ready to post, and post. Okay, I posted this transaction in CashWorks and it is a post-dated check. It means that it has not affected accounts receivable module yet. So if you go to accounts receivable and you print the aging report from accounts receivable, nothing about this transaction will be there. But if you print the same report, customer age trial balance from CashWorks, you can select to include unrealized transactions. If you include the unrealized transactions, sorry, I selected wrong date. Okay, if you include the unrealized transactions, the report will show you that, okay, the customer balance is 5,000, but there is also a PDC for this customer, so actually the net balance is only 1,000. Furthermore, you can choose not simply to include the unrealized transaction, but to merge it. Let me print with apply details. See, now the application merges and it says that, okay, there is the invoice 18 for $5,000 and there is one receipt against it for $4,000, which is a PDC and it has not been yet realized. You can see the check date here. So actually you owe the customer only $1,000. Okay, so now I have a clearer picture what actually I owe to the customer. Furthermore, there is a customer statement report and customer transaction report. All of these have the same options. So when you are sending, for example, a statement to your customer, you can choose whether you want to include unrealized transactions on a customer statement and you want to merge unrealized transactions on the customer statement. As I mentioned at the beginning, when I created and posted the post-dated customer receipt, it did not affect accounts receivable. Now let's assume it's already end of May. So let's log into the company with 31st of May. This is the maturity date of my check. So what I'm going to do, I will now realize this check, send it to accounts receivable and to the bank. For that purpose, I will go to CashWorks Check and Management Console, which we call short as CCMC. This is a place in CashWorks where basically almost all transactions are there, and it allows you to filter, sort, manage, and process the transactions which have been created in CashWorks. So this is the Management Console screen, CCMC. Here I want to select my post-dated receipt, right? So I'm going to remove this from the selections or everything except posted receivable transactions, and I can come to the checks and see, okay, this is the list of my customer receipts which are still not realized. On the options, I can go back here and filter it furthermore. I want to filter it by customer as well. Now if I go to the cash and checks tab, I can see here that only one transaction is for this customer. What I can do with this transaction can be done from this new status. Today, what I will do, I will realize it. Realization means I will send it to accounts receivable and to bank service. So I will commit the transaction. To do that, I will need to choose here realize and click the process button. But before actually realizing it, I want to talk about other statuses available. There is a status transferred. Transfer when you are entering the check, the customer receipts. Let's say you are thinking that you will be depositing in Mashreq. But when time comes, you say that no, I'm planning to deposit it in HSBC. So you will transfer from one bank to another bank. Because it's still not in the bank, basically you are just transferring the name of the bank. So this is transfer. You select a new bank name and then the new bank here, and then you click transfer. Replace. Replace means something is wrong with this check, so you click it replace. The application automatically generates another transaction, which is exact replica of this transaction, and this one kind of voids it. Realize we discussed. Returned. Returned, this check you don't want to happen anymore. You are canceling the check. It was either not honored by the bank, for example, or there was a mistake in the check. And finally, bounced. Now, bounced, this is very important. Bounced is an intermediate transaction. When the check is bounced, after that, you can choose what to do with the check. For example, the customer may say, oh, sorry, I didn't have sufficient funds, but now I have sufficient ones. Go and try to deposit it again. Then, after bouncing, you will realize the check. But if you bounce and the customer says, okay, I will issue another check for that, then you need to return. If you leave the check still as bounced, you cannot go ahead and make another transaction for those invoices which are paid by this check, okay? So let's come back to our transaction, and we are going to realize it because the time has come and we are putting it into the bank. I selected the new status as realized and click the process button. Now if I go to accounts receivable, transactions received batch list, the batch will come here in accounts receivable. It may even automatically be posted depending on your settings in CashWorks. Now this basically completes the full cycle of the check, but there is something more to show you. It's the bank reconciliation. Now that the check has been realized, it also appears in CashWorks bank reconciliation. Let's go to CashWorks bank reconciliation and see the transaction here. Okay. So if I go to the reconciliation tab, let me just leave only customer receipts here. Okay, you can see our transaction here. So I can further now work with this transaction. I can reconcile it. I can reconcile it with error or write-off. You probably know this depends on the amount by which you are reconciling. If it's more than the margin available in common services, bank services, then it is error. If it's less, then it is write-off. You can leave it outstanding if it still doesn't appear on your bank statement, or you can reverse it if it is reversed on your bank statement. So this is about the bank reconciliation. Furthermore, when you are doing the bank reconciliation, you can find a transaction by clicking the Find button here and searching for the transaction. Or you can set status of multiple transactions in one go by clicking the option you want to use for setting the status. Once you are done with bank reconciliation, if everything is correct, the variance here will be 0. And you can post it by confirming that your reconciliation is correct. The functionality that you saw here about customer receipt is also available for vendor payments, vendor-related transactions. There is something we call GL-related transactions. GL-related transactions are transactions for which you don't have a customer or vendor, like direct expenses or direct revenue. GL-related transactions. So all of these have the same post-dated check feature available there. In addition to that, there are other transactions which you can do in Sage in CashWorks. It's bank transfers, for transferring an amount of money from one bank to another bank, as well as customer payments. Now that you saw, you have an understanding what CashWorks does and what is the nature of CashWorks, what it works for, let's go one step deeper. This time I will go to the options and we will start defining different options. I will explain you what each option is for. Let's go to CashWorks Setup and go to Options. Okay. So Component tab is similar to any other Sage 300 transaction. I'm not going to talk about it. Numbering. You are defining the automatic numbering for CashWorks transactions for different types of transactions. Let me just show you the numbering so you can understand what is it about. Each CashWorks transaction has something called transaction number. It is this one. You cannot change it manually. It is always automatically generated. So you choose here what the numbering should be. Furthermore, you can choose to use a common sequence for all receipts all payment transactions. If you select this option, then instead of all this, you will see only receipts and payments. Next, we have accounts. Before accounts, let me just talk about integration. So integration, what to do with the checks which are current dated. See, my check was post dated, so I waited, it stayed in CashWorks, and I waited for it until the date of realization come, and then I went and realized it manually. But what if the check is current dated? What to do with it? Should the application automatically realize? It means that when you post it, you don't need to go to this management console and realize it manually. You post it, it checks if it's current dated, it automatically realizes. So you select that option here. You can choose also by the type, which types should be automatically realized and which ones not. Obviously, if something is cash, it will be automatically realized, right? Next option we have is validate duplicate check numbers for payments and receipts. So you have, as usual, error, wording, or none. Because CashWorks allows you to print it check as well, so this will affect that. And next are other features, which is allow realization date in management console. If you don't allow realization date in management console, then when you are realizing something, the application will assume it's today's date. If you allow realization date in management console, then you can override the realization date by any date you want. Post unrealized transactions to GL. In the beginning, when I was creating and posting this PDC, I said it is not affecting accounts receivable and the bank. This is correct, but GL, it may affect or may not affect depending on your choice here. If you select this option, then these accounts come into the picture. Based on what accounts you have specified here, a post-dated transaction will post a transaction to general ledger for this account. For example, in my case, it was a PDC, so these two accounts would have been affected. Then, when the transaction is realized or returned, or basically on the next step, the transaction which was posted to GL will be reversed. So the net effect in GL will be 0. So this is post unrealized transactions to GL. We have post customer payment to GL entry. This I will need to tell you a little bit more about CashWorks features, about CashWorks functionality. I mentioned that in CashWorks you can enter customer payments. Now, how do the customer payments work? When you are posting a customer payment, it creates a transaction, an adjustment in accounts receivable, and a GL entry, CV, CashWorks GL entry in CashWorks. Here, just the point is, should it post the GL entry in CashWorks? Or leave it open, you will go and post it manually. Automatically post batches in subledgers. When we saw the receipt batch here, I mentioned that it will be either open or posted depending on the options you have selected. Well, the option is this option actually. If you select automatically post batches in subledgers, it will be posted in AR, AP automatically. Otherwise, it will remain there open and you will need to go and post it yourself. Club bank charges with bank transfer. I mentioned that CashWorks supports bank transfers, so you can enter transfers from one bank to another. And when you are entering transfers, there are bank charges. You can enter bank charges with transfers. The point here is when you are posting this amount to GL and when you are showing it in reconciliation to show as one amount or different amounts or two separate lines for bank charge and for the transfer amount. Allow deleting of printed checks, it speaks for itself, and default auto-generate deposit number option. So do you want to use deposits? So this is about integration. Next tab, which is interesting, is post-dated checks options. Here you are defining to use check date as a receipt payment posting date for current transactions and or post-dated transactions. If you don't select this option, then the transaction date will be posted. Let me open the screen. So okay, see, we have date and check date. Now, which of these two dates will go to account receivable as a posting date? Depends on this option. If you choose this option here for current dated or post dated, respectively, the check date will go. If the option is not selected, then the date will go, the transaction date will go. Maximum check age, in many countries, if the check is, I don't know, for example, 180 days older than today's date, it's not valid anymore. You cannot deposit it. So you can write how many days is this age of the check, maximum check age. The application will give you a warning if you're entering a check which is older than this number of days, but it's only a warning. You can proceed. Next option is here is what is PDC lag? How will the application understand if check is post-dated? The application can understand either by basing transaction date, the check date, on the transaction, like comparing with transaction date or with session date. And when comparing, it checks how many days should be the lag to consider the check as post-dated check. So in this case, if it is more than 2 days from the session date, the check date, then it will be considered as post-dated check. Otherwise, it will be considered as current dated check. Okay, so let's talk about source codes now. Source codes are the codes which will be created in general ledger. Transactions created in general ledger will have the source codes. Let me just go to general ledger to remind you what is this about. See the source codes. This is about the source code. In the option, you are defining what do you want the source ledger to be, and what do you want the source type to be, depending on different type of transaction. So CVRZ means it's a realization transaction. You can see from here. There is also the second part here is CashWorks source codes. You can also create CashWorks in source codes, and later on when you are creating transaction, you can use these source codes. Actually, they're nothing like, they're simply used for grouping your transactions. You can later print a report to show all the transactions with a particular source code in CashWorks. The other tabs, I will just show one of them, but basically they are similar for each type of transaction. It's just some default settings. You will be defining some default settings, default banks, rate type, payment codes, what is the default transaction type. CashWorks supports payment, prepayment, miscellaneous payments for vendor payments, and for customers, customer receipt, it supports receipt, prepayment, unapplied cash, and miscellaneous receipt. How to sort the open documents when you are doing the allocation on the open documents. This is similar to Sage 300. Default check printing option. If you want to print options from CashWorks, then you will choose print. If you are not printing checks from the system, you will choose don't print, of course. Allow edit of system generated batches. Similar to Sage 300 AP create batches, CashWorks has the same functionality, and here it says whether you are allowed to modify the batch which is automatically generated by the system. Force listing of batches and allow editing after the voucher has been printed. So the similar options here, 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 and here. Okay, this much about CashWorks options. So once the options are defined, you can go and to the next step before you can start using CashWorks, which is creation of the banks. Now, when you are creating a bank in CashWorks, before you create a bank in CashWorks, it should be already created in Common Services Bank Services. In CashWorks, you will just define some additional information about this bank. The deposit form, which will be CashWorks form, overdraft limit, deposit number, printing, if you will be printing checks, then the check forms, and you can see the balance for CashWorks. Now, basically, if you are using CashWorks, you should not use Common Services Bank Services anymore, because it will not give you the correct picture. If you want to know something about your bank, you do it from CashWorks. You want to enter any transaction affecting a bank, you should do it from CashWorks. Okay, so some information about CashWorks, banks. If you have these two set up, then basically you can start using CashWorks. But there are additional things which you can do in the setup. So I'll go back now and talk about these additional things. Source codes. Remember here I said you can have source codes in CashWorks when we were talking about this part, and they will be kind of a way of grouping your transactions. Well, they will be grouping transactions, but also some places like in GL entries, they can also bring some default transactions, default information. Distribution set is just group of source codes. Should be familiar with the term from accounts payable, right? It's just a group of source codes with its amounts. Tax codes and tax groups, well, so far it's not applicable to UAE, so I'm gonna skip this. Optional fields, if you are using you have the license for optional fields, then you can also define optional fields for CashWorks transactions. So for all the transactions, you can define optional fields. Behavior is the same way as in any standard Sage 300 optional fields, so I will not talk about it. Payment selection code. I mentioned that similar to accounts payable, CashWorks also allows you to create automatically payments based on the due date or discount date of a transaction. So this is the setup part of it, payment selection code. You define the payment selection code here. The information here is basically very similar to the one which is in Sage 300. You define your criteria, exclusion list, any optional fields to be added. And when this is done, later on, when the time is come, you can go to CashWorks, vendor-related transaction, and use the Create Vendor Payment Badge screen. To automatically create for transactions for vendors based on the criteria. And you can furthermore choose to select documents by due date, by discount date, or by both, due date or discount date. If you run this process, registration will print only a report for you. Generation will create an AP payment badge, which you can post. And finally, what we have in setup is miscellaneous codes. Miscellaneous codes are kind of like not really customer vendors, but something you work with these people, but they are not in your accounts receivable or in accounts payable. So some additional information can be added here and later on used when you are creating GL entries, CashWorks GL entries. Setup reports, I will not go through them because they are just printing whatever you have defined in the system. Now you know how to set up CashWorks. So you know about all the options in CashWorks. Let's go back and recap once more what are the transactions available in CashWorks. And I'll talk more about the transactions now. So customer-related transactions. There are two types of customer-related transactions, customer receipts and customer payments. Customer receipt we saw, it goes to accounts receivable. If it is realized, it goes to accounts receivable as a receipt entry. Until it is realized, it remains in CashWorks. You can enter 3 types of customer transactions. Sorry, 4 types. Receipts, prepayments, unapplied cash, and miscellaneous receipt. For example, if you're entering unapplied cash, all you need to do is just enter the amount of the check or the receipt. Let's talk about other tabs here, okay? Because now we have an understanding. Let's talk about other tabs and see what other features are available in CashWorks. Well, obviously on the rates tab, you can choose from which bank you are paying, and if it is multi-currency, either your customer or the bank, you can choose the currency and the exchange rate. Allocation we saw already. Miscellaneous charges. You can have miscellaneous charges associated with your transactions. So you can select the account here and there will be this charge associated. Usually this happens if something is done through bank, right? Bank is keeping some money. So you can enter the GL account here and the amount of this particular miscellaneous charge. Just a second, I'll show you. Okay, so any charges? Let's say $50 is the miscellaneous charge. So my amount is $500 and $50 is the miscellaneous charge. Address, this is available. You can, if the customer has an address, it will come here, but you can modify. Attachments. You can attach any document to your transaction. You just have to have the soft copy somewhere accessible. You attach it, and then that's it. Later on, anytime you want, you can come and view the document from Sage 300 from CashWorks transaction itself. You don't need to have the soft copy anymore. And the totals tab. See, on the totals tab, the application shows how much is actually the money. See, for example, the receipt amount is 500. There is a miscellaneous charge of 50. So actually, you will receive only $450. And this summary information is shown in 3 currencies: bank currency, customer currency, and functional currency. And one last thing I want to talk about these transactions. When you add a transaction, there is a copy button. What you can do, if you are entering one transaction after another, which is similar to the previous transaction, you can just click the copy button to replicate whatever is in the first transaction in the second transaction and only do the modifications required. Okay. So this is customer receipts. And all these tabs basically are available for other transactions also. Vendor payments also have attachments, have miscellaneous charges, totals, rates. So this is available for there as well. Now customer payments. Customer payment is the opposite situation where you are paying to the customer instead of receiving money from the customer. You can make customer payments only against transactions, against negative transactions. So against credit notes, against unapplied cash, prepayments, and negative receipts. So stubs are similar, but when you are making a customer payment, you will need to define a clearing account. Remember, I mentioned when we are talking about options that customer payment creates 2 transactions. One, an AR adjustment. Second one, a GL payment. See, CashWorks GL payment. Now, this account will be used as intermediate account. So from one side, it will be debited. From other side, it will be credited. So the net effect on this account will be 0. Then you will select the document for which you want to make the customer payment. Okay, how much you want to pay. And add. Similarly as with other transactions, there is a voucher available, and because this is a payment, you can print a check if the type of this payment is a check, or you can choose not to print a check and enter a check number manually. Now it gives me an error. Why? Because in the CashWorks options, we have set that we want an error for duplicate check numbers. Okay. Same. Miscellaneous charges are available here. Address, if the customer has address, it is automatically populated. You can add attachment and view the totals. When you post this transaction, there will be an AR adjustment created. Let me just change the type to something different. Save it. And post it. See this amount, right? 15.36. Let's post it. Now if we go accounts receivable transactions, adjustments, we will see this amount here. See, there is $10 against credit note for customer 1,200. So the balance of this credit note is reduced, mathematically increased. And if we go to CashWorks, the other part of this transaction is in CashWorks. And this is the other part. So you post this, you post the other transactions, then both your customer and your bank will be affected. Now another hint which I want to give you here is related to this GL entry. In case you want to reverse a customer payment, you need to return the GL entry from management console and to manually enter adjustment transaction in accounts receivable, because just returning the this GL entry in management console will not open the invoice for the customer back. Okay, so you also need to make an adjustment transaction there. So these were the customer-related transactions. Vendor-related transactions are similar. Actually, there is only one transaction, vendor payment. You can enter payment, prepayment, or miscellaneous payment. You can choose here the payment code, whether you want to print it or not, a location. Miscellaneous charges, totals, so on. Next, we have something called GL related transactions. As I mentioned, it is called GL related because there is no customer or vendor associated with it. It just has remit 2. Okay, so let's try to enter one GL transaction. When you are creating a GL transaction, first you need to choose it's a receipt or payment. Let's say I'm making a receipt. I can enter a miscellaneous code if I have one. I must enter the payer. Whom am I paying? Okay, so in this case, who is paying me? The bank information and the details. Here you will be entering against which account this amount should be debited or credited. It's a receipt, so it will go against sundry income. Let's see whether I have an account like that. Okay, let's say we have an interest income account. I will say it's $2,200. Okay. Obviously, there is no miscellaneous charges in this transaction because, well, you can simply come here and add the miscellaneous charges in the detail lines. Edit and post it. Similar with other transactions, this can be either current dated or post dated. When it realizes it goes to the final step, it directly goes to general ledger and it creates an entry in general ledger. Okay, so this is CashWorks GL through batch list. And the final transaction which is available in CashWorks is bank transfer. To do bank transfers, you will need to go to CashWorks Bank Services, transfer batch list or transfer entry, create the transaction. You will choose from which bank, to which bank you are choosing, what is the amount you want to do the transfer. If there are any miscellaneous charges, you can enter them here. By the way, you can enter miscellaneous charges for both the depositing bank and for the bank from where you are taking the amount. And post it. This one again goes to the transfers cannot be post dated. They are always current dated and they go directly to general ledger when you post them. This is bank transfers. Okay. While we are in the bank services, let me just show you a couple of more things here. It's the bank balances screen. The bank balances screen shows the balances of all your banks in functional currency or in the bank currency. Bank currency is the bank statement currency. And the amounts shown here are the last statement closing balance, deposits, withdrawals, and basically this plus this minus this will be your closing balance. Also, it is showing something which is called bank pending balance. Pending balance is the balance of the bank if all transactions that are open or unrealized will be realized, will be posted and realized. So this is the bank pending balance. And of course, CashWorks Bank Services has its own report, reconciliation report. The bank balance is what you saw here. Various reports related to reconciliation, transfer voucher and transfer posting journals and posting statuses. Sorry, page statuses. Okay, management functions. We talked about management console. So once more, I want to repeat. Basically, CashWorks Management Console is where the CashWorks related transactions are. You can find a transaction. You can change the status of the transaction. For example, you can make a realized transaction as bounced, bounced transaction as returned, posted transactions as realized or returned, etc. You can do them one by one, or you can set status. You can set status, select range of transactions, and mark them with the new status in a range. And click process, so the transaction, the new status will come into effect. There is one screen here which is called unrealized transaction alert. See, if you have any transactions which should have been realized before today or today, the unrealized transaction alert screen will show these transactions. Basically, it is almost replica of the cash management console screen. The only difference is that it shows here only posted transactions, so PDCs, which are not yet realized. That's what posted means, and the ones which are due or before on today's date. So you can come on this tab and see that these three transactions, either you should realize them, so you should investigate, like they were, let's see, what is the check date? So the check date is in 2010, 4th of January, but today is 31st of May. So something went wrong. This should have been realized, right? So you need to understand what went wrong and take the according action. Periodic processing is just for clearing the history. Transaction reports are standard reports like batch listing, status, voucher, posting journals. There is one thing here which is out of standard, with source journals. Remember I said you can have different source types in CashWorks and then group transactions by source type. Later on you can print this report and say, for example, print for me all the transactions for which the source code is a particular thing. The application will print for you only these ones. For example, I can say group by source code. Let's remove it. Okay, now you can see that with the source code of Amex, I have this much transactions, and total of them is this much. Okay, and vendor-related transactions we already saw. But there is one last thing remaining for me to show you today, is analytical reports. We saw one of the analytical reports, which is customer age trial balance. So basically, analytical reports, these 4 analytical reports are similar to their Sage 300 counterparts. The difference is that they have include and merge options for post-dated checks. Customer statement is not very similar, it's a little bit different. So I'll just print one customer statement for you to see how it looks like. Let's print for 1,200. Let's say include unrealized transactions. Okay, so this is how a statement looks like. You can see in this case, because I didn't merge, it shows the document and then below them unrealized transactions. Okay. Receipt payment aging. Now this one, you can choose to print the transactions, to select different range of transactions, and then the application will age for you when this transaction will become, like by check date, it will age it. Basically, usually you will do this for both dated transactions, and the application will show you when they will become due. Okay, so it's all current here. See, it's all current because it's all first. Let me see. Next is very interesting report, which is the cash flow report. Cash flow report prints for you all transactions posted to that particular bank within this range. It's either by date or by year period. You can choose to select here one bank or multiple banks. You can choose to include unrealized transactions, to print the summary report as well. Only the summary report if you include this. Let me just print one so you can see. Now it shows for you the opening balance as of a particular date, inflows, outflows within the date range, and then the total closing balance. The last page will show you the summary, inflow, outflow. Let me just put another date here so you can see. Okay, so you can see the opening balance. There was only one transaction in this period range. Inflow, there was only one outflow, and the closing balance. At the end, you will see the summary of this. Missing check reports, if you want to know if you are printing checks and you want to know which the ranges of which checks are missing, are not in the system, you can simply select the bank, put some kind of range, like from 10 to 1,000, you want to know which checks are missing. So it will just show that these checks are missing, so you don't have any transaction with this check number in the system. And tax tracking, as I said, it's still early for UAE or for taxes for Gulf countries, but basically, if you will be using the tax tracking report, will show you the taxes generated based on CashWorks transactions. Okay, this is all about CashWorks functionality, which I wanted to tell you today. There is one more thing, last thing I want to tell you today. It's that soon we will be releasing, just for your information, we will be releasing a new product update for CashWorks, which will have probably sometime next month we will be releasing it. This will be product update for version 2017, and it will have multiple new features. Among these new features, there will be posting of multiple batches in one go, automatically posting transactions in general ledger, You remember in subledger it's already there, but automatically posting in general ledgers we will add with this new product update. And the other feature which I want to mention, to highlight from the features in the product update, is the replace transactions. Now when the transaction is being replaced, you will see what was the original transaction number on the new transaction number. Okay, so this is all. Thank you.